Today, let's make a plant-based Thanksgiving bake.
Now, it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving to enjoy this lovely dish.
No.
But that's the muse for this dish, if you will.
Any holiday works. And for this, I'm going to start with 3 medium potatoes. Now, I didn't weigh them. Somebody's going to ask, how much do they weigh? I don't know. It's a very forgiving recipe. You don't have to worry about it so much. And I'm just going to cut them into cube-like pieces, about, yay big. What's that, 3/4 of an inch or so?
Sure.
Yeah. It's much easier to do when you're standing up. But see, piece about like that. I'm just going to chop up the rest of these potatoes.
Now, we left the skins on these because skins have lots of nutrients, and there's going to be so many different textures in here that they shouldn't be causing a textural issue.
Nah. And we normally do just eat the skins on potatoes. These are also yellow Yukon Gold style potatoes. You can use red potatoes if you want to. Idaho style potatoes, you can. They just tend to fall apart a little bit easier than these guys. So that's why I'm using more of the yellow variety of potato for this. And once I get all my potatoes cut, I'm going to throw them right into a casserole dish. By the way, I have an oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, up with the Celsius right here. And we're going to roast these.
This happens to be an 8-inch by 11-inch casserole dish. We were going back and forth of what size we should use for this.
Yeah.
And we're going for the moundy, but just seeing the potatoes in here.
Explain what you mean by moundy.
Okay, so presentation. If you overstuff a casserole dish,
It looks nicer for television.
Little, so that mounds up in the center, this is more appealing than just kind of a sunken, filled casserole dish.
But one advantage to using a larger pan is it's shallower, which means you get a little more crispy topping. So it really depends which way you want to go.
Yeah. We might have to transfer to a different one. We don't know yet.
No, we're going to make that work.
Okay.
I have here 3 carrots. One kind of big guy, one medium, and one kind of wimpy. So about that much carrots. And I'm cutting those into about the same size as the potato. Maybe just ever so slightly bigger.
Now, if there's any weird spots on your carrots, just cut them out. Use your common sense.
No big deal. We don't peel them.
Right. I scrub them with my vegetable brush over in the sink to make sure I dislodge any unwanted elements. But other than that, we just cut and go.
And just like the potatoes, I'm just going to cut the rest of them up. It's not a big deal. We're just cutting up potatoes and carrots. Super complex cooking stuff. The trick is, though, keep them about the same-ish size. Like, as I got to the end, I went thinner because it's a bigger piece. You don't have to get, like, crazy. Just roughly. That way they cook evenly. Okay, now that I have my carrots done, toss them interspersed with the potatoes. Did you see that one piece, like, jumped in?
It did. It's, like, crazy.
I wasn't sure how that happened, so I was like, all right, we'll just go with that. And now, you can just throw this in the oven as is. I like to season it a little bit, and I forgot to do one thing. I was going to do a little bit of oil in the bottom just to keep them from sticking, but instead I'll just a couple of sprays of oil. It's probably like not even a half a teaspoon.
Yeah. We love to use the sprayer for our oils because it helps keep the oil amount down. If you start glugging in oil, you're going to quickly have way too much oil.
Yep. And I'm seasoning with some salt. It was probably half a teaspoon altogether. And fresh cracked black pepper, please, because, you gotta.
It makes everything better.
Yeah.
It just does.
But if you really want to leave the oil out, you really want to leave the salt out, go for it. I just suggest not leaving out the black pepper unless you have some aversion to it. Then of course, you don't have to. All right. This is going to go in the oven for about half an hour to get kind of started cooking.
At what temperature, Bri?
350, like I said.
I didn't.
But I have to put the Celsius here again because now I had to mention it again. It's okay. The more times you mention it, the more times they'll remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did that for your benefit.
Yeah. It's our story and we're sticking to it. Be back in just a sec. Okay. No dressing, stuffing type dish would be complete without some sort of a crouton or a bread. So for that, we're going to be using whole wheat bread that we got from the store. And just a little tip about keeping bread. We bought this loaf and immediately stuffed it in the freezer. Well, we didn't stuff it. We just placed it in there because if you stuff it, it'll compress. That's not good. And we freeze our bread. Anything that we're not using that day, we freeze it. I've let it sit out at room temperature for a little while. Some of it's still a little bit cold in the middle, but it actually thawed and it's as good as the day we bought it. So that's a nice little trick for keeping bread fresh.
Do not put your bread in the refrigerator. That will accelerate the stale process.
Oh yeah, yeah. And what I want to do with this is cut it into cubes. So I'm going to start by cutting it this way. Probably should use a serrated knife, but I'm not. And cut it this way. So it looks like I'm going to get, like that, like 3 cuts across that way. Just move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing here. And then, yeah, probably down the middle. You don't want it to be too big of a piece, but you don't want it to be too small either, because then it'll cook too fast and get super, super crunchy, which I like crunchy. I just don't want it to be like burnt crunchy, you know? There's a vast difference between burnt and crunchy. And it looks like, yeah, we're just gonna 3 cuts on both sides for this size of bread loaf. Again, so much easier when you're standing up. Last time I made this, I was standing. It was so much easier. So I'm just going to cut up the rest of our bread. Now, I might have a little bit too much here too. And if you have a little extra croutons, it's totally okay. They work really well on salads. But I want to give it a little seasoning. So I'm going to do a little bit of spray oil and then get in there with my hands and mix that around. The tiny bit of oil is going to add a lot of flavor when this starts to crisp up a little. But again, if you want to leave it out, you totally can. We tend to cook with a little bit of oil, but not a crazy amount. Like some people are glugging it in there and, you know, that kind of thing. I don't do that. Just, you know, what do we got? Maybe half a teaspoon to 3/4 of a teaspoon in here total. Now my hands are all oily, so I'm gonna count on you to put in some black pepper.
Oh, that means there's gonna be a lot.
Don't get too crazy, because in the oven, black pepper can actually burn, so we want to be careful.
Just crazy enough.
Yeah, and I need some salt on these too. Now, a lot of times bread does have a lot of salt in it, depending on the bread. This particular one doesn't taste salty to me, so I wanted to do a little bit of seasoning on it.
Light sprinkles.
Yeah,
good.
just that. Just a pinch. That was literally a pinch. Okay. Now, while my hands are still dirty, let me go grab a sheet pan. All right, I have a sheet pan with a little parchment. That's it. I'm gonna dump the bread right onto that. Try to make one layer. I know my parchment's not big enough to cover the whole thing. It's just to more or less keep things clean, you know? I don't want to waste edges of the parchment. What are you laughing about?
Nothing.
What?
That's a lovely parchmenting you did there, babe.
Okay. Well, okay. The sheets don't fit the sheet pan. So I either have to waste some to make it fit, or a little bit of it isn't covered. I'd rather have a little bit of it not covered than waste parchment and have to throw it away. Or have no use for it in the next 15 years. All right, I'm just kind of making one layer in the oven for 10 to 20 minutes. You want to check this after 10 minutes. If they start getting a little too crispy, take them out and let it sit. Now, I'll show you what to do after the first 10 minutes too. Be back. All right, so the next part is going to be our gravy / seasoning mixture. And for that, I have 2, I guess that's like half ribs of celery. I'm just gonna cut the ends off because, you know, they're kind of nasty and gross and nobody wants to eat that. Same with the other end, you know, I don't want to eat that. And you can be a little rustic with the chop on these. I'm gonna go medium size, 1/2 inch pieces or so, something like that. And even when I get to the end, I don't mind nice big chunks of celery like that. This is a rustic dish. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So that's our celery, and you know, just for ease, I'm gonna throw it in the bowl. I'm trying to use minimal vessels today, and I'm usually very guilty of using a lot of vessels, so today I'm trying to use minimal vessels.
I appreciate this attempt.
I figured you might. Derica ends up doing all the cleaning, so yeah. No, she didn't warn me or anything. I just thought I'd be nice. That's all. All right. And you know, you've seen me cut onions before. I should probably just do that instructional video on how to cut an onion. Even though some people don't really like the way I cut onions. It's all right. I'm not like one of those street vendors that can go in their hand. I just do it as safely as I can. Those guys scare me, man. I mean, did you ever see that?
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's some skill, though, to be able to do that without cutting right through your hand. Now, what we were talking about earlier, as far as this being a side dish or a main, you can totally make this a main if you really want to. There's not a tremendous amount of protein in it. I'll just say that. It's mostly vegetables, but it works great as a stuffing. But there's potatoes in it, so it's a little more filling than a standard stuffing. So you could just pair it with my tofurkey clone.
It's a dressing, not a stuffing.
Depends on where you are in the world.
Yes, but if you go by...
Dressing is just the nicer word for it. It's the same thing.
Sure, but lots of people attribute stuffing to stuffing it into something, which is not a recommended...
Yeah, that's not a good way to cook it.
...scenario.
Well, we don't have anything to stuff it into anyway.
No.
You know, because we're plant-based. We don't do that.
That's right. Though you can stuff...
Squash. Stuffed squash.
When you cut them in half and you de-seed them and you have that nice cavity, you can put this in the squash.
You probably want to cook it all first, though, and then cook the squash, and then bake them together. Kind of like what we're doing today.
Yeah.
All the constituent components get cooked, and then everything gets cooked together. And now I'm going to start doing some mushrooms.
We have...
Half a pound.
Half a pound mushrooms, which is normally the smaller container size.
Yep. I just cut the ends of the stems off because they're kind of nasty and I don't want to eat that. Plus, they also have a lot of the growing material. Yeah, that. I was going to say rooting material, but that would be wrong. And what do we do with this pile of stuff over here, Derek?
That pile of stuff is not garbage. No, it's the ingredients for a veggie broth. I'll link our homemade veggie broth from scraps in the description below.
I'm just cutting them into about 1/4-inch pieces. Nothing fancy. If you really have an aversion to mushrooms, first, we can't be friends anymore. Second, you can leave them out, but to me, they're adding a lot of like a meatiness feel, an earthiness to this dish.
Yeah.
They're kind of important. I mean, if you really just can't, like if you're allergic to them or something, obviously.
We're using baby bellas. If you want to use a more exotic mushroom, feel free to go for that. Just remember they're going to have a stronger flavor.
Baby bellas are like the most common mushrooms you're going to find other than the white ones, which they're the same kind of mushroom. And all in the bowl. Everything. You paid for all those little bits and pieces. All right. The next step is going to be, well, it's probably really close to the time to flip over the bread pieces. So do that in a second. All right. 10 minutes in. Time to flip the bread. And I'm just going to use regular old spatula, give them a flip. They're starting to have a little bit of a crisp to one side of them. We want them to be kind of crispy, but you don't want like, what's a good word? If you break your teeth when you chew into it, it's probably too hard. How's that? It should still have some give in the middle. I'm doing a horrible job at this, but you get the idea. And back in the oven for 10 more minutes. One of my favorite flavors in this dish is sage. And we're using fresh sage today. I have done this with dried sage. It's not quite as pungent, but it does actually still work.
Normally we're growing our own sage, but I don't have any plants at this time. So this is 0.75 ounces, or basically just the little packets you can get at your grocery store, a full one of those.
Yep. And I don't like the stems. I don't like eating wood. So I take them off the stems, get all the leaves, even these little baby ones. The stems can go into the compost or something, that's fine. All right, so I have a technique for getting it all rolled together. It's not the neatest thing in the world, but it works, just trust me. All right, so I tend to grab like a really big leaf, and then I'll just sort of roll everything together and then hold it in place. It's pretty simple. And then slice across, like 1/4-inch slices or so. And then you have these nice pieces of sage. But we don't actually need this quite yet, so I'm just going to set it to the side. But it's time to start making the gravy. Okay, so I have my pan over medium to medium-high heat. It's on 6 out of 10 for my stove. And I'm going to take our veggies and just unceremoniously dump them in there. Notice, no oil. Don't need it. All these veggies, the mushrooms, they're going to leak out some liquid as they cook, and that's going to make give you something to cook with. Plus, I'm using a hex-clad pan, which they're pretty good for non-stick, so, that works too. And I'm gonna let that cook for a few minutes. All right, we're about maybe a minute in, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of salt over this, just literally a little sprinkle. That helps the veggies to start giving up some of their juices. Okay, so as you can see, there's some liquid in that pan. It's been just a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes. And our mushrooms are starting to cook down a little tiny bit. That's a good thing. That's what we want to happen. But I don't want to cook everything down to mush because remember, this is going to get recooked later. But I do want to start seasoning this. I have here 1 tablespoon of dried thyme that I'm just going to sprinkle over the whole thing. Some fresh cracked black pepper, as much as you like. Derek likes it peppery, so we make things peppery. Probably a good ½ teaspoon at least, I would think. And I'm going to take 3 tablespoons of flour and start sprinkling that over the top. This is kind of going to make our roux or a slurry for us to thicken that gravy. And then mix it all through. I want to just make it as smooth as I can. It's going to coat all the vegetables, and that's perfect. That's what we want. If you really wanted to make a roux using oil or butter, you totally can. I'm just trying to do this a little less fattening is all. If you get some bits sticking to the pan, it's totally okay. Don't worry about it. You just want to cook out some of that raw flour. See, if you just scrape around a little bit, it comes right off the pan, no problem. Next, I have 2 cups of veggie broth mixed with a little bit of our bouillon because we didn't quite have enough veggie broth. And just dump that right in. On top of that, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. That's going to act kind of like a salt. Well, it is a salt, but it's going to add a ton of flavor and a little bit of color to this gravy. And then get it all mixed through. We want to break up those clumps. I still have it on medium-high heat. I think it's still at 6. Yep, still at 6. If you want to, you can get in there with a whisk and kind of break it up a little bit better. With all the pieces in there, it might be a little bit difficult to do, but yeah, you can manage. It gets everything off the bottom. So as you can tell, it's really, really loose right now, which is to be expected because, you know, the flour hasn't done its thing yet. And just keep it moving around a little bit during this phase. What we're doing is we're letting this heat up, letting the starch in the flour do its thing, where it starts to kind of open up and it thickens the sauce, making a gravy. While that comes up to temp, I'm going to take our sage and just kind of sprinkle it in. Mix that around, stir it through. If you put the sage in too early, it can actually burn when you're cooking up the other veggies, so that's why I just wait till the end when it's just about ready to thicken. It smells incredible in here already. Now, the thing about making gravies using flour is you actually want it to come to a boil. If you use cornstarch, which makes a slightly different kind of gravy, you don't need it to actually come to a full boil, but definitely for flour, you do to get the most strength out of it. All right, we're just starting to see some bubbling, a little bit of almost a boil happening. We should start seeing it thicken up really quickly now. Okay, and after just another minute or so, you can see it's definitely getting thicker. Not quite there yet, maybe another minute or 2, and then we'll take that off the heat. Okay, now I'm gonna kill the heat. Give it one last stir, and it's time to assemble everything now. All right, to put all this together is really, really simple. First, I do want to mix up the potatoes and carrots just a little bit in here. Just move them around a little bit so nothing's stuck to the bottom. Really, that's the only reason I'm doing it. And then take some of our gravy and mushrooms and just start ladling it over the top. But you don't want to use all of it yet. That's important. Just kind of moisten everything. Maybe I'll use about half of it.
And you can use more of the mushrooms and celery bits rather than the liquid, because that's really what you want to reserve for the end.
Yeah, I'm just going to start scooping out the bits and the pieces. I'm sure there's another way to do this. This works. Just get it in there. It's okay. Spread it out a little bit. Get everything evenly coated. I would eat it just like this. It smells incredible, looks amazing, lots of veg in there, all good. But now we got some croutons. And remember that parchment? There's a reason. It's not gonna work well, but that's why I did it. See, Got about half of them. Derica asked me, is all this going to fit in there? Yep. Remember that question of, is it all going to fit? Probably not. We also said we wanted it to look like a big pile of stuff on top of this. And it does.
I think you're good. I don't want to put any... Okay.
They're perfect, by the way. A little bit of soft in the middle, crunchy on the outside, decent flavor. Okay. All right. To me, that's piled up high enough. Those extra ones go in a salad. It's all good. This rest of the gravy, though, this is the secret. You want to pour that over the top. Just get it all in there. I want to kind of cover up the bread with it a little bit. It'll make some of them mostly covered, some of them only partially covered. Makes for texture variance. It's a lovely thing. And now, goes back in the oven for probably about 45 minutes to an hour. What I like to do, though, is put some tin foil over it first. So hang on. Okay. Remember when I said I like to cover it with aluminum foil? Apparently I like to do it a little too much because this is all the aluminum foil we had left. I know I called it tin foil, but it's the same thing in my head. It's the same. We have it's just covering it, like just barely. So this will work. It'll do the job. But we already added it to the list. We're going to get more. I'm just going to pack it in a little bit. What happens when you use aluminum foil on something like this is it's going to steam that bread a little bit. But it's steaming it with the gravy flavors.
And the juices from the vegetables as they're cooking,
right.
They're going to give off steam. The tin foil or aluminum foil is going to collect that and let it condensate back onto the bread. So that way we don't have extra crunchy bread.
Right.
But at the end of our cooking, Brian's going to show you another trick.
Yep. So in the oven, 45 minutes. See you then. Okay, 45 minutes in, I'm going to take the tin foil off. And we're going to look at this.
It's fantastic.
It really is. It's not actually done yet, though.
But notice how our dry pieces of bread did not get extra crispy.
Nope.
That was because of the tin foil.
Exactly.
But we do have some places that were touched with the gravy that are smushy.
Right.
So what are we gonna
that's
do
why
about
we're
that?
not done. It's going to go back in the oven. Oh, we forgot to mention. 15 minutes at 350 Celsius right here. No tin foil. All right, 15 more minutes has passed. I also let this sit on the stove for about 15 or 20 minutes to cool off a little bit because it's kind of like napalm when you first bring it out of the oven, and nobody really wants to eat napalm. So I'm just gonna grab a scoop. You heard that crunch, right? There's a good healthy crunch here. Yeah, that's good for a quick little taste, right? Get all the pieces and some gravy. Oh.
Okay. You're good.
Gravy. Gravy.
Gravy.
Got to get some gravy, you know? Wow, that's a lot for tasting.
It is a lot. That's why when you kept putting stuff on there, I'm like...
But I wanted to get a little bit of everything, you know?
All right.
And I'm going
No,
to do this.
I'm going to be careful because I know this is probably going to
still really hot.
burn my face.
Don't burn your face. I like your face. Let me get water, just in case. All right, now I'm ready. That's just good stuff.
It did burn my face a little bit.
Yep. Me too, just a touch. This has
But it's
such
worth
there's like a richness to it. There's an earthiness to it. There's just a huge amount of textures in here. The carrot has just enough give. It's perfect. The potatoes are cooked exactly right. Like they just, as you bite down, it just mush, just mush. Not mush. As you bite down, it breaks apart just right.
Yeah.
Not mush.
It's not mush.
The bread, some of it's a little on the soft side. Some of it's a little more crunchy, making it really interesting when you're eating it. Like, it's like a box of chocolates.
And that
you never know what you're going
herb
to get.
combination just brightens up everything. Like your flavor is just exploding in my mouth right now. Super yummy. I could just eat that whole dish of this and probably be very, 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 very uncomfortable. But
Yeah, we've actually eaten this as a meal, just
Yeah.
as it is, as a meal, no problem. Like I said, if you really want to make this super extravagant, you make a one of our tofurkey clone rolls on the side, maybe heat up some broccoli or some Brussels sprouts or some other green veg, and you have a full meal.
Make our homemade applesauce.
Yeah, that would work really well too. Storage options. I don't think this stores well in the fridge. I just don't. There's gravy in the bottom of the pan that's just going to make everything get very mushy and soggy if you do that. Maybe a day or two, and that's about it. If you really wanted to, though, you could mix it all together. That way some of the gravy will get soaked up by the croutons, and then bake it again open. That way they'll dry out and you use up the gravy without things getting too mushy. You're pushing it a little bit, though. We actually considered freezing it. I don't know if that would work either for the same reason. So my best option is make this and eat it as soon as possible. And as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on The Bistro.